Welcome, everyone, and welcome back. So good to be back with you. We have 2 hours today, and our hope is to finalize and ask you several questions that will help the team to put together the report. As you have seen in the past, we are live on TVW. We are also recording this meeting. The etiquette slide that you can see is what you've seen before, and so we just remind you for these things as the way that we will connect with one another today. And David's going to give us a little bit of an overview, bring us up to speed, catch us up on what's been happening, and then we're going to go through the 5 parts of the legislative request. And in some places we have just a few confirming thoughts, and then there's some places where we need to dig in a bit more. We need to try to find some get closer to I don't know if consensus is the right word. So that is where we are headed today. And David, I'm going to hand over to you to get us started, please.
Okay, well, thank you, Kelly, and good afternoon, everybody. As we take the next 2 hours to review the recommendation survey and finalize what we can report to the legislature, we wanted to quickly recap how we got here. So Substitute House Bill 1539 created this group and asked you really to study 5 different issues. 1, aligning state wildfire property mitigation standards to a nationally recognized science-based wildfire mitigation standard. 2, enhancing community wildfire mitigation efforts. 3, how to share risk data to assist mitigation efforts. 4th, how to improve hazard and risk transparency for insurance consumers. And 5th, establishing a retrofit grant program to reduce wildfire loss in insurance non-renewals and cancellations, and whether and how local fire districts can collaborate with the grant program. So the report to the legislature is due Monday, December 1st, which is immediately following the Thanksgiving holiday. So to recap, the bill names specific member organizations and ex officio members to be the foundation of the working group. The 2 co-chairs invited additional members for their expertise and input during the process. The work group began its assignment of studying the issues by taking a topic, one of the 5 topics, and inviting experts to provide important background information. The work group met 7 times in 8 weeks for multi-hour sessions each. And really, I have to applaud the work group for its amazing attendance during these. It's really remarkable, and it shows the importance of these topics and these issues. The work group concluded with facilitated discussions for about 3.5 hours on the topics over the last 2 dates. The work group has collected and shared dozens of resource documents to help inform the conversation. Again, we want to say thank you to all the members that have helped collect these valuable resources. Additional information sharing occurred when after each of the meetings, there were questionnaires and surveys relating to the topics. All of these are archived on the work group's webpage for review. Now to help provide context on the report that's due on December 1st. So this report will outline the formation of the work group and all the efforts you have made over the past 4 months. We will likely not be able to have unanimous agreement on recommendations, and that's okay. The report will reflect the majority opinions and also provide minority concerns and other views raised. For the logistics of how this will need to get done, after today's work group meeting, the work group staff will begin constructing the report. The plan is for staff to share the initial draft with the 2 co-chairs on Monday, November 3rd. Then after their review and input, the co-chairs will exchange drafts on November 17th for incorporations of the edits and the comments. And then the work group staff will then work to finalize it for the Monday, December 1st transmittal to the legislature. At that point, all members and interested parties will also receive a copy. Okay, going forward for today's discussions. So in September, the work group responded to a series of questions on each of the 5 legislative assignments. We're happy to report that every member named in the Substitute House Bill 1539 was responsive for all 19 inquiries. And additionally, some of the ex officio and additionally added members were also responsive. Again, this is extraordinary participation, and we're so appreciative of the commitment that you've shown to this work group. As you can see from the grid, there was strong agreement on the inquiries around enhancing community mitigation and creation of a retrofit grant program based on the IBHS Wildfire Prepared Home Guidelines. There was some agreement around the topics of data and hazards and risk sharing and how to increase the transparency for insurance consumers. Finally, there was no agreement on the topics posed around wildfire property mitigation standards. And we want to get into that a lot more today to see if we can find a pathway for the report. And since there are some topics that have strong agreement, we're going to start going through those for confirmation. So we have plenty of time to address the wildfire property mitigation standard topic alone. So with that, let's check in on the topic around retrofit grant program to help homeowners have access to insurance in collaboration with local fire districts. As we go through the 5 topics, you'll see slides like this. It will show a percentage of the agreement and with the total number of yes, no, and other responses. And so with that, thank you for allowing me some time to give some background, and I'll hand it off to Kelly to get the discussion started.
Thank you, David. Thank you for the context. And as David said, we're starting with section E, or the 5th section. And there is a lot of consensus here. So I think we will go pretty quickly through the first few where we have consensus, and then we'll come to the ones where we had less consensus. So if you are looking at the report that David and team sent with the questions, as you can see here, these are the question numbers. This section was questions 17, 18, and 19. And so there appears to be strong consensus around developing a grant program using IBHS certifications to reduce the number of non-renewals and cancellations in the residential market. There were some objections and concerns related to wanting to use DNR wildfire ready neighbors, or FireWise, as the benchmark, and also a member not wanting to require property owners to meet a standard. And further research on vegetation requirements are needed. Let me pause there and please speak up or put into chat if there's any more you want to say around either parts of this section. Yes, Robin, please.
Hi, thanks. So, on these responses here, DNR was supportive of using IBHS standards for a framework for this grant program. I just wanted to add, a few things after kind of looking at this a little bit more, just thinking of ways, not changing my answer from a yes, but just kind of wanted to add some supplemental information that as we look at different types of communities that are different kind of homes like trailers or other building materials that may not be I guess as relevant for IBHS standards, that we think about that from an equity lens, and just looking at some of those issues that could come up when we're looking at properties that are not maybe new construction and may have some details impacted by what is and what isn't covered in IBHS standards. But overall, not changing the answer from yes, and still being supportive of this.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Steve.
Yeah, hi, Steve Hawks, Senior Director for Wildfire at IBHS. And just to add on to what Robin just mentioned, is we are in the process of updating our technical standard, which currently is built around single-family homes, to include multifamily homes. So triplexes, apartments, condominiums, other multifamily type structures like that. And so there is more styles of structures that will be available for the IBHS program, as an example.
Thank you. So we're not going to ask you to vote again. Actually, let me pause and Tony, come to you.
Actually, when I was reaching out to a lot of the practitioners, one of the questions that was raised is, how much is it going to cost a new homeowner moving into an IHBS house? How much is that actually going to add to the house, i.e., low-income individuals or first-time home buyers?
And are you asking someone to answer that question, or you're saying that you want this to be part of the questions that are put into the report?
I think that's a question that should be put into the report. I've heard numbers between 10 and 20%. So on a $300,000 home, that's even at 10%, that's another 30,000. That's a significant increase, which we may be able to manage with vegetation issues or management instead.
Okay, thank you. Ian, actually, I think you go by Lance.
Yeah, thank you. Just one quick comment. You know, how this reads 19, should we, this grant program collaborate with local fire districts as part of the program? I think we have to be careful there if we're going to restrict this to fire districts or local fire departments to include municipalities. And then we also have to remember that many of the fire districts have no or very, very limited enforcement type capabilities because of their ILAs, depending on if the county even has a fire marshal or not, or if it's a building official wearing two hats. So many times enforcement is really tough for fire districts if that should need to happen as part of this framework.
Thank you. Thank you. Andrea, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name.
Yeah, it's Andrea. Thank you. Yeah, I would just say supportive of this if we're just talking about retrofits. I think somebody asked a question earlier about new construction. So I guess my question to the project team would be, are we just talking about retrofits in this one? And if so, I'm supportive of it.
Okay. Thank you. Steve, is your hand up from before, or do you have another question?
I have a comment on the question about the cost. We recently worked with Headwaters Economics to release the cost a study for Altadena, California, where the Eaton fire burned through, and as those residents look to rebuild, same questions come up there. What's the added cost potentially to get to the IBHS plus level designation? And we used a baseline house of $500,000. Is about 1,750 square feet for that general area. And of the costs to go from traditional non-wildfire built structure to California's building code was an added $13,000. And then to add on to that to build to IBHS Wildfire Prepared Home Plus was an additional $2,000, so $15,000.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Patrick.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Or good afternoon?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so I'm supportive of this as well. I just want to make sure that we're not using local fire districts. Maybe we can expand that out to fire departments or whatnot, because we don't have fire districts that cover our entire reservation. There are fire districts that are within the reservation, but the majority of our I guess our fire protection is from the BIA, and we have EMS stations in the districts that they come out of, but they're not called fire districts.
Okay. Will you send a message to David and team if there's specific language you want? That would be really helpful. Patrick, if you could do that, not at this moment, but at some point that would help.
Okay.
Thank you. Melissa.
I was gonna offer maybe local governing body instead of local fire district, because like what was being pointed out, it depends on who's working on code enforcement, if this is gonna fall under that branch of government. Be the building department, it might be the fire agency or county county government.
Yes. David?
Yeah, so just for clarity, the IBHS program is not a code. It's a voluntary program for property owners to try to mitigate their house against wildfire loss to have access to the insurance market. So it's not a code requirement. It is a voluntary program that the insurance industry is backing, and the IBHS is doing the science to produce this recommended threshold to reduce the home from being at risk to wildfire loss.
I wasn't sure if 17 and 19 were related to each other. So that's where it's like, if there is going to be a grant, who's going to administer it? And then it looked like 19 was also looking at a grant program.
Right. It is true. The 17 and 19 are both related to the grant program.
Thank you. Steve?
Actually, I think David answered my question, so I can hold. I was just going to say, if we needed to put some of that language in there, maybe just the authority having jurisdiction would be better, just generic language. But I think David addressed that. We're talking about voluntary. It's probably not necessary for change.
Okay. Excellent. So we're not going to ask everybody to vote again because we've gotten your consensus around this through the initial survey. But let me just pause and see if anybody has any objection or anything that's important for this group to hear before we move away from this section. Anything else you want to share? All right, thank you. And one down. So David, I'm going to hand back to you to give us an overview on the next section.
Okay, fantastic. So as Commissioner Kruger said in one of the summer meetings, wildfire mitigation to impact the insurance market is not really an either or scenario. It's a stair-step approach where the first step is around community mitigation. And then the second step, the property owner may take individual actions on their property to increase their mitigation. But here, the question is around enhancing wildfire mitigation at the community level. There was strong agreement here. So Kelly, may I hand it off to you?
Thank you. Yes, so again, strong agreement. This is subsection B, and you see the questions 5 through 8 along the left side here, and then your answers, just like you've seen before, the yes, no, other. And so so in addition to kind of strong agreement overall, there was also broad consensus to recommend returning the community resilience investment portion of the past wildfire related funding, that was House Bill 1168, to be restored and to consider increasing it. Is there any objection to including this? Please speak up or put that into chat. Tony.
So when I held meetings with about 20 or 30 community resilience practitioners within the state, they are in favor of the wildfire ready neighbors, but it needs some tweaking.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be going forward with the program as is, and then also with the establishment of funding for it. We need to do some work on House Bill 1168 because are we using the money appropriately to get the biggest bang for our buck?
Thank you. And you also raise a good, let me just remind that we've read all the comments, and Lauren in particular has looked at all these details and will certainly be including the concerns you've raised will certainly be mentioned in this that you mentioned in your surveys will be included in the report. Finally, on this topic, we learned about local level community coordinating groups that are in the field engaging with high risk wildfire communities. There's strong agreement, to recommend creating a formal policy framework that incentivizes and sustains these types of groups. Are there any objections to the report reflecting this? Tony, do you have a new comment or is your hand up from before?
Before, sorry.
No problem. Okay. I think we have consensus around subsection B. Is there anything else anybody wants to, any objections you want to share, or anything we haven't heard that you think is important for this group to hear? All right, thank you very much. David, please take us to section C.
Sure. So this group heard about the state's current efforts to create a data sharing platform for the natural hazards. It's being stood up by our state's technology agency, WATEC. We also heard about the work that DNR is doing, evaluating hazard and risk maps, and the Department of Health's work on their environmental health disparities map. There was also an identification of the vulnerability that there appears not to be an easy way for wildfire mitigation efforts to be known by all the interested parties, including folks that make the wildfire risk scores, even local fire communities, fire protection communities, and statewide level. So there was an identification of a gap there. There was also some discussions happening across the Western US about a data commons that's kind of coming out of California to try to address this information gap. And so, Kelly, here's the results of the survey.
Thank you very much. So as you see here, the 3 questions that were part of this and the votes on the right-hand side, there's a good level of agreement that data and risk sharing are important to help coordinate wildfire mitigation activities between state agencies, local fire districts, and property owners. On the state agency side of things, there was a lot of agreement to expand the natural hazards data portal, be the platform for data sharing, and very strong opinion to create an access point for local fire districts. Are there any objections to expressing this in the report, always with acknowledgement of concerns provided? Tony.
We need to remove the fire district wording because a lot of people who work in community resilience are not fire districts.
Okay. Thoughts on better wording?
Whatever we were discussing back on first page.
In the previous one? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Around the topic of whether the state should contract with another entity to provide wildfire hazard and risk data to help inform the state and consumers, there were not many no's, but there were a lot of others listing concerns. We'd like to try to gauge whether we should even include this topic in the report. Do you have thoughts or suggestions for the group to consider if it were included, or to just leave it out? This is really about question 11, if you want to refer to the slide there. Kenton.
Thank you. I guess I'll just say that I don't think there's harm in leaving it in. I don't know what others' comments were. I think my own were along the lines of there are entities out there that are doing this work, and it continues to improve in its accuracy and value. And it may be useful to find a way to work with those existing entities and products to see if there's a way to coordinate that activity. I think there is value in continuing to gather hazard and risk information. And as the availability of the information becomes more precise and more predictive, it's important for it to be recognized. This whole effort really needs to be, on the whole, in my point of view, from my point of view, which goes beyond just insurance, it needs to be a way that we are transitioning and how we are responding as a society at the property level, the community level, and the state level to learn to live with wildfires. So more data and more information and a better understanding of what's happening and how we're responding to it and what effect that is happening seems really important to me. So I would be in favor of including this. If people have particular concerns about how it's worded and suggestions on how to improve it, I think we should be open to that, but I think it should remain as part of the recommendations.
Thank you. Chandra.
Thanks, Kelly. I agree with what Kenton just said, and I would be curious if the folks who have hesitancy over it would, since we can't see the other comments, if people would be willing to share their hesitancy.
I'm going to go to Mary, and then if anybody wants to put their hesitancy, wants to speak up or put it in chat, we'd love to have that. Mary. Oh, Mary, you just went off.
Oh, am I here?
Nope, now you're here. Yes,
Perfect.
see you again.
So I think my initial comments are echoed by Kenton and Chandra. I think the only thing that I would submit is if an individual property owner feels as if their information and whatever mitigation they've done isn't accurately reflected in whatever the database says, that there's some sort of mitigating opportunity for that property owner to prove or disprove whatever it is that they've done to either change or accept or understand whatever their score is, for lack of a better title.
Thank you. Hillary.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. One of my concerns is just being adding a caveat that homeowners and residents have the opportunity to opt out instead of like opting in, and giving them some of the like authority to say whether their data is shared and who it's shared by.
Okay. Thank you. Robin.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, with question 9 and 12, recognizing that we had the 6120 effort for hazard and risk mapping already underway, and that's going to be moving into a more public facing engagement. We're going to be doing a series of community outreach events coming in the winter. And so, we will be looking at this issue of working with local entities to identify values and structures at risk. And we're going to have, the statewide hazard map, and it's going to be risk map at the county level. So I would just, think it's important that we have that effort in mind as we move forward with the recommendation on the details for this, and that we're not duplicating efforts, and making sure that we're able to harness that effort.
Thank you. Melissa.
I wanted to echo that statement. Seems that some of us also sit on the Emergency Management Council and work with the Emergency Management Division. They have been talking about hazards at risk and protecting that information from being released and used inappropriately. I think we need to be mindful of how this data would be being used.
Thank you. Finally, on this topic, we learned of an information gap related to scheduled or completed mitigation efforts between property owners, local fire districts, insurance companies, and risk analytic companies. There is not a central repository of mitigation efforts to help inform all of these folks of efforts on the ground. There was strong agreement that the state should explore how to collect and house this type of information. There were also concerns around privacy and which entity would hold the information, as many of you have just said. Would the work group prefer the recommendation reflect the identification of the information gap, and further study needs to occur to help find a way for important mitigation efforts that are communicated with all interested parties? Thoughts on that preference? Patrick.
So I don't know how much in the weeds we want to get here, but I don't think that the state and the tribe really share any data that I'm aware of on like our mitigation treatments that we do in the forests, on how we pretty much have existing dozer lines around all of our communities. So if a fire does come, we can bang those out super fast. All the fire scars that we have already, we have about 600,000 acres that's burned in the last couple of years. So, you know, most of the heavy fuel loading is gone. So I'm not sure what kind of data we're talking about. Sorry, I missed a couple meetings.
That's okay. David, do you want to speak to that now, or do you want to take that one offline?
Yeah, Patrick has shared their thoughts on this, so we can.
Okay.
And Patrick, I think we're happy to reflect those concerns in the report if we want to acknowledge that there is an information gap, at least, which is what I think the work group is all agreed on, and then the report would simply reflect all of these layers of concerns.
Okay, thank you.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Tony.
So I'm administrating one of the community wildfire defense grants, and so overall I'm going to end up doing 4,500 acres of treatment, hopefully. If prices don't keep going up, but I think the goal should be in there, at least on a large scale, is how do I get the data of where I've done a 100-acre project into a data system that the insurance companies use. Because as I said previously, I'd done a lot of work out at Suncadia, and I saw some of the risk maps that the insurance companies were using, and they were still all rated high fire danger. So I think that's kind of one of the bigger issues. Plus the individual parcel owner at a smaller scale's privacy. But how do we get where we do actually do something that should mitigate fire behavior? How does that get factored in or used? Because from satellite data, you're not going to be able to see that a lot of times. You have to actually go out and go, oh, all these trees have been pruned, never mind. And that's it.
Thank you. All right, before we leave subsection C, anyone else, any comments you have or objections that you want the group to hear? Thank you very much. David, would you take us to subsection D, please?
Yeah, happy to. So the work group heard from 3 of the country's top wildfire risk score modeling companies and from the insurance industry on how wildfire risk scores are gathered, generated, and used to determine eligibility for insurance. And the work group had some lessening agreement on how to share the risk valuations with consumers. So Kelly, I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you. Okay, so like David just said, the work group learned that insurance companies do not uniformly identify wildfire risk as a cause when reporting non-renewals and cancellations to the OIC. The survey showed some agreement that insurance companies should internally log non-renewals or cancellations and what they're due to as such for reporting purposes so that the state can accurately know the impacts of wildfire risk and insurance cancellation. There were some no's from the insurance industry and others suggesting that there maybe should be some solution other than requiring that. Should the report reflect a recommendation that there should be a requirement? Should the report reflect a recommendation that there should be a no requirement for an insurer to log non-renewals and cancellations due to wildfire risk internally so that it is available when asked by regulators and the state policymakers, or include a recommendation that there should be a requirement for insurers to log these instances? Kenton.
Sorry, I couldn't find the mute button.
No problem.
So obviously I represent the insurance industry on this panel and gave considerable thought to how to respond to this question. It's difficult when it's kind of in yes or no format. So I think I wrote lengthy comments in the other section. I think we have, what my point was in my response is that we want to be cautious about how much imposition of reporting requirements that may or may not be actionable, informative, and helpful to consumers we want to impose on insurers at a time when insurance costs are already pretty dramatically high. So it's not so much that, from my perspective, that this is a hard no on everything that's included in these two questions. It's more about, should we explore ways in which additional transparency can be tracked or provided? Who should get that information? What should that information include? And will it result in a sort of a good cost benefit analysis? So the amount of time, effort, staff time, investment in resources by insurers to track and or report and or provide additional transparency can be significant, and you want to measure what the value of that information is against the cost of collecting it and gathering it. So from the perspective of our association, and I think I speak pretty broadly for P&C insurers, at a time when we're already working on a lot of sort of transparency related legislation and rulemaking in a number of states, this should be taken in the context of what is already being done in that space and what information will provide the most value to policy holders as well as public policy makers.
Thank you. Michael.
Yeah, this is Michael DeLong from the Consumer Federation of America. Speaking from the perspective of consumer advocates, we strongly support both of these things. We think it's very important for insurance companies to internally track when wildfire risk is used to determine eligibility or the cost of insurance. We think very much that policymakers need to know this because too often they're like sort of like groping in the dark looking for information. And we also very strongly support requiring insurance companies to disclose wildfire risk scores to consumers. We have heard many stories, not just in Washington state, but across the nation, of consumers who have seen their cost of insurance skyrocket, their eligibility disappear, their policies canceled. And when they've tried to actually get any concrete information, whether it's like, what are the reasons for the cancellation or my premium hike, or what can I do to even just improve things and reduce and promote mitigation measures, they just hit like a stone wall with no information. And there's a lot of frustration out there. There's a lot of anger. We understand that transparency can sometimes result in some additional costs, and we want to be mindful of that, but we badly need transparency and concrete information. Without that without that kind of stuff, I don't think it's possible to really have effective mitigation or an effective grant program. So we strongly support these. So thank you.
Thank you. So a little bit more on question 14 that Michael, you just started talking about. The survey indicated less agreement around the topic of sharing insurance company risk scores with consumers. While most folks not associated with the insurance industry agreed that the information should be shared, folks inside the insurance industry questioned the value of the information, pointing out that not all companies use wildfire risk scores, and the costs associated with doing so may increase overall costs of insurance. We are curious from all of you, should the report reflect this lack of agreement and not make a specific recommendation, or make a specific recommendation and articulate the opposing concerns? And also wondering if anyone has concerns with the report reflecting this topic at all. So please share your thoughts. Michael, is your hand still up, or do you want to comment again?
It's a new one, but I can let someone else
Okay, go ahead.
We would strongly support including for question 14, the recommendation saying that we support requiring insurance companies to disclose wildfire risk scores to consumers. We also think it could be fine to acknowledge that there's disagreement about this, but we think it should be very clear that most people outside the insurance industry strongly support this, and to include that recommendation. So,
thank you, Kenton.
Thank you. I guess I would say that that it's difficult, especially given the charge that this group was given by the legislature. It's difficult for that topic to not be addressed in some kind of recommendation. So while it may be self-interested for me to say, no, there shouldn't be a recommendation on this, what I think we need to say is that any recommendation should be carefully worded to reflect the concerns the industry has about, in particular, providing actionable information to people who request it, as opposed to information to everyone that's super broad and may result in confusion or frustration for policyholders. So I think I mentioned in my written comments that in other states we have seen it's a proactive approach, but it is specific to when an action is taken by an insurer that should be of concern to a policyholder, as opposed to generally providing detailed information to people who haven't asked for it and haven't suffered any negative consequence related to the information. So the wording of the recommendation, I think, is important, and I don't know to what degree we'll have an opportunity to either vote on or comment on the wording of the actual recommendations themselves. So I want to hold out the reservation that I might be opposed to a recommendation if the wording can't be recognize these concerns that we're raising today.
Thank you, Tony.
So on this one, I think I went with either other or no, mainly because I've gotten a lot of these scores and they don't do the homeowner a lot of good. But I think there is some value in trying to have some version, and it depends on the insurance company. I will say that some of them provide good recommendations that can help a homeowner. Others are totally irrelevant. So I think that's the bigger concern out of this is what's the feedback that the insurance companies are providing back to the homeowner? You know, how do we do that? And I would think that requires further study.
Okay, thank you. Ryan.
Thank you, Kelly. And I'm not sure if it was you or David at the beginning of the meeting, but you laid out kind of the rules and the procedures. Seems like this is perfectly suited to including this in the report and allowing insurance and others to give their minority report. That just seems like how we've laid out things. Go ahead and make the recommendation, and then for sure let the minority include in the report the reasons for concerns with the recommendation.
Yeah, thank you. Corey.
Yeah, hi. I am an insurance agent, non-voting member, and this one I put other on. I can just foresee getting phone calls from property owners once they receive these wildfire risk scores, and then there's nothing to do with them once they have them. So I think I understand why they might want that information, but if they receive a score, there's no actionable item for them to do, nothing for them to address that's going to change the score or impact their insurability. I don't see how it does anything aside from adding a burden to the insurance company. If there is value to it, it seems like it has to be in conjunction with all the other things we're talking about, the grant programs or work that they can do to benefit them and increase their insurability. So that's kind of my biggest hesitation with it, is it kind of just feels like something that we can ask and that they can do, but it doesn't have a tangible result potentially.
Thank you. Andrea.
Yeah, Andrea from BIW, just wanted to agree with Corey. I think this sounds like a great idea, but I think, like, you know, as it's implemented, if it were ever implemented, it could kind of fall apart as the process unwinds a little bit. So I would like to see our attention focus elsewhere, specifically the grant program.
Thank you. Kenton.
Thank you. I guess I'd just like to add that the question sort of presupposes, and I think a lot of people presuppose, that the industry does something based on a thing. And that's not how insurance works. Individual companies are reviewing data on an individualized company and sometimes individual property level. So an insurer X isn't going to treat a wildfire risk score or even have the same wildfire risk score as company Y. And so when we set up a recommendation that's super broad about what insurers have to track and or report or be transparent about, it ignores the super sort of hyper individuality of how companies respond, how the scores are developed. And so I think more work in this area is definitely, somebody mentioned earlier, a little bit more time spent on this might be a good idea for additional or future efforts. But again, I guess I just want to caution about how this particular recommendation comes together. I want to be mindful of the fact that policyholders can be frustrated by this experience, especially as these underwriting guidelines change from company to company. This is a difficult time, and I think insurers know that and recognize that some additional opportunity to provide information and actionable information and finding out about what their wildfire risk score is and where it came from and what it means and can they do anything about it. Those are all good things to work toward, but we have to be careful, I think, what we set up in a really broad recommendation in that area as we move forward. So just wanted to add that in. Thanks.
Thank you. Steve.
Probably just reinforcing to some of the things I heard, I guess, as I read the recommendation. I assume that particularly if we go forward with something like a grant program, we're going to have education requirements and outreach that are necessary. And so perhaps coupling that with a requirement that we better describe or help individual property and homeowners understand how risk scores are derived across the insurance industry. I think that's honestly been one of the more valuable parts of this process for me, is gaining an understanding. I know a lot of our stakeholders in the fire service have little to no understanding of how those are actually done. So if we could incorporate that as kind of an educational recommendation as part of the outreach, I think maybe that would be more constructive based on what I'm hearing.
Thank you. Melissa.
I would echo Chief Brooks's comment after hearing Keaton speaking. I think then more work in that area needs to be done so that the consumer understands the nuances.
Thank you. Brian.
Good afternoon, everybody. Brian Allen from Grange Insurance. The only thing I'd add on in terms of insurers and disclosing information, I am in complete agreement that actionable information is vital here. One other thing that could be considered as part of this process, to Steve's comment, is what other information is available for consumers out there in that space. Individual insurers might not have it, but what programs, if the state's going to put forth a program, is there something that we can do to refer them to resources, to a grant program so that they have knowledge of what's out there so that they can understand and get a better sense of what their risk is individually. It's going to be tough on an insurer basis to provide very specific information, just given the detailed level of risk and the amount that it costs. So just one of the considerations is how do you provide consumers even more information about what's available for them, whether it be provided by the state or just recommendations on what they could consider that could be done via some sort of notice process as well.
Thank you. John.
Yeah, I'm gonna echo what Brian and Kenton has said, but one sort of specific example that I don't think adds value, others may disagree, but there is a jurisdiction not terribly far from us that requires insurers to, for example, in the name of mitigation, tell a homeowner what their actual property is built out of, as if they could mitigate that. Like, you're not going to burn down your wood house to build a cement house to get a better rate. That's not going to happen, nor should it. So if you're going to try to provide more information, I think that the word actionable, is necessary. Try to figure out what you're actually telling people and how much it helps them. We now tell people, if you want to get a better rate, change your house composition. And that's not only a waste of money, but I would assume tremendously frustrating to the actual homeowner, because it almost makes it sound like we're mocking them. But that's what the state makes us do. So there you go.
Thank you.
And
Tony.
just to clarify, John, that's not
sorry.
Washington State, right?
That is not Washington State. That is a border state of ours who will remain nameless.
Thank you. Tony.
I was gonna say actually a couple of things. Actually, making recommendations of changing your siding, depending on the situation the home is in, that might actually change the score. Telling them to make it out of concrete, yeah, good joke. But I think one of the things that we talked about, what other programs are out there, and our biggest complaint that I am getting from all the practitioners is literally the insurance companies aren't listening to us. We'll could go out, make recommendations to people. So currently one of the insurance companies that I just ended up helping a homeowner work with wanted all grass mowed to 100 feet from the house. That be 4 inches or less. I have no clue to what that does for fire spread, more than mowing 15 feet from the house, but that is the standard. And I think that is one of the things that when we talk about looking at these recommendations and putting things out there and talking about them being actionable or referring them to other programs, is somehow we need to get alignment between all of this.
Thank you. John, do you have another comment?
Yeah, just one quick thing. I don't disagree with Tony. This played out in that other state in part because I don't know how much people know this, but insurers have various products. Our older products often get closed for business, so they're not available for new customers, and new customers get put on newer products. Older customers can shift into those if they want. Our older products as an industry may not use, some do, a lot don't, sophisticated WILE scoring models. They're just not rating for it. It's not built in, because 15 or 20 years ago when we filed those products that may still have customers on it, that wasn't technology that was available at the time. So in this particular instance, a product that does not even use wildfire scores or risks in particular is being asked to disclose things that aren't really applicable to it, because it's applying to every kind of product. So that can be, that's how we got there with that particular issue in Oregon. It is less of an impact on our newer products, but for those old existing books, you have to be careful what you're doing, because you're adding costs to them. Insurers may choose just to not put in the time and effort, depending on the size of that book, and shut that book down and tell people you can go into a new product or you can find something else. That may or may not be better for the customer, but that's how insurers would treat increased costs on older books of business. So.
Thank you. Tony, do you have another comment, or is your hand still up from before? Okay. And John, we just heard from you, so you're good. Perfect. Anyone else? Anything else you want to share about subsection D that we haven't heard? Mary.
I just had a question, more for my own edification. We are not talking about a universal scoring mechanism, but a scoring mechanism per insurance company, however that is defined, correct? I'm seeing
David, I think you're nodding yes.
Yeah, Mary. So a wildfire risk score, they're usually generated by large data analytic companies. We heard from VeraRisk and Moody's and a company called Zesty AI. They produce through all of their data collection and research a specific score and a scale for each parcel. The insurance companies may subscribe to some of these, and we also learned they may subscribe to a couple of these different score producing programs. The insurance entity will then internalize the score and make their own internal determinations and calculations for whether they want to cover a certain property or not. But yeah, so this is talking about informing the insurance consumer when when one of these wildfire risk scores are used in the evaluation process.
Right. Okay, perfect. Thank you. And I was, I think for my own purposes, I was kind of conflating question number 3 with 14 because it seemed as if 13 might imply some sort of universal tracking system that could then take into account all the varying different factors, which might create one master score, as opposed to question 14, which would be on a company, on a per company basis. So thank you for that.
Sure. And just to clarify, 13 is relating to how insurance companies internally track non-renewals and cancellations. The insurance commissioner collects annual data on non-renewals and cancellations, where they're occurring and when. However, not all insurance companies internally categorize reasons, and some do not include wildfire risk. So there's no availability if a policymaker wants to know in the state of Washington how many non-renewals are caused by specific to wildfire risk. It would require the commissioner doing an additional what we call data calls, a request for information to companies to do that. Right now we have an annual call, and the question 13 is around, well, should we ask insurers to or to require insurers to at least log wildfire risk as one of the reasons they report.
Thank you both. Anything else on subsection D from anybody? All right, so now we're going to move to subsection A, where we do not have so much agreement, and David's going to help us get started here.
Okay, so the legislature clearly finds it important to identify wildfire property mitigation standards that align with national recognized and science-based standards. There was discussions over the meetings about the differences between regulatory requirements and voluntary actions. We had that conversation today as well. There was also discussions on standards versus guidelines, and even the word property here. Does that mean structures, or does that also include land? So the work group reviewed the unique and different entities in this space, many different publications. Some were wanting a single standard. Aspirationally, we should all have a single standard. It's easy for consumers to know about, while others pointed out that there's so many different use cases that some of these guidelines are kind of written for and applied towards. One thing that I just want to share for the members, that this conversation is kind of ongoing. The Community Wildfire Planning Center, with support of the Resource Legacy Fund, compiled a real comprehensive listing of all of these in a report. It's listed on your work group webpage, but they're going to be hosting a webinar next week if you want to follow along and kind of get a better detail of the dozens of different guidelines and standards. And I'll drop that into chat in just a little bit so you can register if you're interested. But for today's meeting, we're kind of looking to try to find a pathway towards a recommendation. The report can easily reflect a lack of agreement and list all of the concerns that have been raised. But we have some time, so hopefully, Kelly, I can hand it off to you and we can see where we can go.
Let's see what we can do. Yes. Okay, so we, in our prep meeting before this, we came up with a couple of poll questions that we thought we would use to kind of get this conversation going, because as you see here, there was not so much agreement around these questions, and you see the questions on the left hand side here. So Deanne is going to help us with Deanne, for us it's poll number 1. We are curious for everyone who is a panelist in this will be able to make a vote on this poll. And the poll, I'm going to read the question for you if you are listening and you won't be able to see the poll. Since the grant program will use IBHS Wildfire Prepared Home Guidelines, should it be recognized as a supplemental wildfire mitigation standard for insurance purposes? That's the question. And in a moment, Deanne is going to pull this up. And we're forcing you into a yes, no. I know you're not all going to like that, but let's see where we land on this one, please. If you're a panelist, you should be able to vote here. Put in chat if you're having any trouble. Five of the 43 have voted. We're going to leave this open another few seconds in case you are still thinking about this. Okay. Oh, a couple more votes coming in here. All right. Deanne, would you close the poll for us and show the results? You should be able to see this now. 22 folks said yes, 7 said no, and 29 of the 43 answered the question. So let me, I'm going to stop sharing this and let me open up for conversation. Thoughts, questions, clarifications you want to make to your yes or no? Tony.
So my question is, was this the IHBS standard as to the structure and the 0 to 5, or was it the IHBS plus, which extends out to 30 feet?
David, can you help me?
Both. It would be for both reasons. So it would include the standard and include the plus. The plus, the base IBHS guidelines are focusing on retrofitting the property to withstand windblown embers to decrease the possibility of ignition. And then the IBHS Plus standard is more along the lines for complete remodeling or even new construction standards. I believe they both, though, reach out to 30 feet. If Steve's still available, maybe he can correct me.
Yeah, hi, David. Thank you.
Hey, Steve.
Sorry, it took me just a minute to get off
No problem.
there, but the base level designation is more for a retrofit, and it looks at those items that are most vulnerable on the house and the immediate surrounding area from an ember exposure. So the roof, gutters, vents, the bottom 6 inches of a vertical surface where it meets a horizontal surface, and then out to 30 feet for defensible space, including that first 5 feet, the zone 0. And then the plus level designation is more for a new build, but it is also applicable to existing structures that are, as David mentioned, going through really a complete mitigation overhaul. And it addresses all the other components that are vulnerable to the flames and the radiant heat of the fire. So the window siding, doors, eaves, etc., in addition to those requirements for the base level designation that are vulnerable to embers.
Thank you.
You bet.
So no
it says
vegetation in there. Because that's where a lot of people push back, is everybody's good with the 0 to 5 and the structure aspect of it. It's more the vegetation out there. So that's what I was trying to seek clarification on.
Tony, I would encourage you to look at the technical standards. It doesn't remove all vegetation outside the 30 feet. There's just some guidelines for how the vegetation is from 5 to 30.
And I've looked at those standards, and those standards are fairly weak within our state. It requires things that we do not have to do to reduce fire to the houses sometimes, not always, but sometimes. And so it's much more situational. That's why I said everybody's good with the 0 to 5, but once you start getting out, the one I always use is the spacing of trees. That's situational, and if the trees are pruned up high enough, why do we care that the crowns are spaced 10 feet apart or not?
Thank you. Shannon, but I think it's actually Melanie, right?
Thank
was
you.
not being cooperative. So
it says it's changed, but then it doesn't show up on screen. So apologies.
Yeah, I know. That's
Melanie
okay.
McElhannon on here on behalf of Shannon Marbett. Kind of in keeping with this conversation, I think forcing a yes/no is really difficult because the answer is it depends. And we've been talking about what set of standards do we mean, but I believe the question also said for insurance purposes. What does for insurance purposes mean? And I apologize if you already covered that, but I don't remember it.
The legislative assignment is around how to help insurance consumers have greater access to insurance. So we're talking about eligibility for insurance, whether an insurance company will elect to cover a certain person due to wildfire risk.
Sort of answers the question, but sort of not, because if they get a certain score, does that mean they must be insured? Or, I guess, again, I think it's just really broad, so.
It is. So the IBHS program, IBHS is supported by the insurance industry and have done the groundwork and the science work and the research work to produce a certain level of actions that, if accomplished by the property owner, they can become certified on an annual basis. And the insurance industry recognize these efforts as a pathway towards insurability.
Thank you. Robin.
Thanks. I wanted to try to tie the last two comments together. So, Tony, I wouldn't disagree with you on fuels treatments, that homeowners can do with whether it's pruning, spacing, or prescribed fire, whatever the fuels treatment would be. Definitely wouldn't argue that that shouldn't be considered in something. But I think to get to the other question about the insurability, if you're a homeowner that is facing the challenge of whether or not you can get insurance, and then when we're looking at the long-term problem of trying to expand access to the market and ideally drive down rates, but that's, I think, a longer term and not necessarily something that's going to be impacted by these actions. But if you're a homeowner that is can't get access to the market, I think something that the IBHS standard offers is that it is recognized by the insurance industry. And so I would just suggest that we don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good on this, because it's a voluntary program. Nobody's being required to do these. But if you are a homeowner that's facing these issues, if the insurance isn't the issue and you follow Firewise USA sites or recommendations from Wildfire Ready Neighbors program or Fire Adapted Communities network, all that is very good. You can increase your chances of your home surviving. You can definitely mitigate. But if you're faced with the issue of not being able to get insurance, I think that's the issue we really need to focus in on. If we're making recommendations in response to the legislation to improve access, then IBHS is the standard that is recognized. So I just wanted to add those comments.
Thank you, Robin. Tony.
I agree with you there, Robin and Chandra. It is voluntary. The problem is, once it starts coming in, it will become the mandatory standard at some point, more than likely. And the other aspect is, yes, it's accepted by the insurance companies, but did the insurance companies do their due diligence and look at all the various options out there? Because I don't have a problem with it in general, but why, if we're looking at the science, if trees are pruned 10 feet tall, the grass is less than 6 inches, there's no way trees on the property are going to catch fire. That is the science. So the question, so I'm not saying they're wrong, because in general, it does a good job. But there's other science out there, and it becomes fire it's a multi facet problem. If we eliminate the house catching on fire from embers, then we're mainly trying to prevent direct flame impingements and radiant heat issues. And how we do those in different places, there's a lot of different ways to do it, and they're all science-based. And that'll be it.
Thank you. Melissa.
Sorry about that. I just wanted to echo, like, I've had an opportunity to go out and see the work that has been done where Tony works. I think there's credence to what he's saying about the mitigation work. And there are several comments in the chat about the risk assessment and, what the consumer is getting. It seems like a lot of work needs to be done in that space, because if the consumer can't afford to do the mitigation work, then they'll be priced out of getting insurance coverage is what I'm understanding from this conversation.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I was trying to put my.
Okay. David, Lauren, do you feel like we're ready to go to the second poll? Is there anything more you want to say on this one?
Sure. Let's go to the second poll.
Okay. So the second poll question, Deanne, I will ask for your help to bring this up. And let me read it for anyone listening. Should the International WUI building codes be Washington State's wildfire property mitigation standard? And again, if you're a panelist, you should see the poll now and be able to vote. We again forced you into a yes, no, and we will have time after this for you to share if you feel like it depends. Tony, do you have a question about the poll, or can I wait till we have the poll results to have a call on you?
Property. So are we talking the whole entire property or the structure?
We're talking all that the WUI building code encompasses.
Thank you.
Okay, and we're going to leave this open just a couple more seconds if anybody else wants to put their vote in. Okay, Deanne, would you close this for us and share it, please? We're quite close to a tie here. 15 said yes, 13 said no, meaning 28 of the 43 voted. So let me stop sharing this and invite comments. Representative Andrew, I can only see part of your name. Please, I'm sorry not to properly address you.
That's okay. It's Andrew Engel. So I'm strongly opposed to the fully adopting the Wildland Urban Interface Code, just because some parts of the code I think would be pretty effective. Some parts of it would have some value, but are be so cost prohibitive that I think that it would virtually stop all rural development in my district.
Thank you. Andrea.
Yeah, Andrea from BIAW again, also in strong opposition to the full WUI code. If we are wanting to focus on the equity concept, using this as a mitigation standard could be helpful. However, when we're looking at the equity piece, we have to be mindful of people who are able to afford either retrofitting or purchasing a new home in areas that could be impacted by wildfire. And as the representative said before, it can be extremely costly. Our builders have told us it can be anywhere from like 15,000 to up to 40,000 for a two-story house. So that's really expensive, and we're already in a housing affordability crisis, and this would just make it worse without actually requiring anybody to keep their insurance. So strong opposition. Thank you.
Thank you. Kenton.
I'd like to first recognize the comments from the previous speakers that I think bring some really important points about this entire discussion to the forefront of this group, which housing affordability and equity are critical issues in our state and across the country right now. And so it's the question is a little bit difficult to answer in the, I don't want to blame the wording of the question exactly, but it said, should the international WUI code be the mitigation standard. I think that's a problematic way to word that, because, I mean, are you talking about a mitigation standard for building codes across the state, or are you talking about a mitigation standard that somehow is in competition with the IBHS standard, which are actually even more rigorous than the international WUI code? And then, as has been pointed out, if you're talking about adopting it as the statewide building code, you run into, I think, a lot of problems. You have to meet people where they are, and that gets a little ahead of where people are. We insurers, I think, fairly uniformly believe that we need to have upgrades to the state's building code, and there are issues that come along that are both localized and political when you start messing with building codes. The purpose of this group's work, I think, is to consider property mitigation that insurers would recognize in a favorable way. So I don't know that we need to include a recommendation about a statewide building code that adopts the international WUI code. I think it is important for the legislature and local municipalities, local governments, to continue to consider ways to improve the building code so that, one, they're more uniform, although that has to recognize there are differences in what these areas of the state look like and how the structures are built and how far apart they are and all that sort of thing, density and all that sort of thing. However, at the same time, we need to focus on the, kind of the issue at hand. What voluntary program can we encourage people to use, including providing mitigation dollars to help people at the lower end of the income spectrum to make modifications to their homes in a way that protects their property and their neighbors' properties at the community level, and focusing on that and trying to avoid getting into the debate about the international building code might be a wiser direction for us to go.
Thank you. Tony.
I was just going to say, we follow the building code within my county, but we had to modify various aspects of it because some of it's out of date. An example is using staining. Generally, ultraviolet eliminates it within 3 to 5 years. So who's going to restain their house every 5 years? Those kind of issues.
Thank you. Lance.
Yeah, I just want to say I do agree with Kenton on the point that this is a building code standard. The WUI is a building code standard, and it's not a mitigation standard, and it shouldn't be accepted as a mitigation standard. But it is a starting point of a slightly more stricter building standard in the WUI, and I think it's important that it was important enough that I encouraged our city council to adopt it back in 2021 in the city of Spokane. What people also have to realize on this committee is, since it is a building standard, it really does not affect built homes in the WUI environment unless you're going to do a substantial addition or remodel or change to that structure. Okay, so it doesn't really even affect those homes that are there. That's why we're talking about these IBHS standards across the state that could have some effect on those existing homes. Now, if you're talking new construction, it really does not add that much more cost to new construction. It's somewhere in the 3 to 5% range on new construction, mostly because many materials are already being used that meet the WUI standards, right? I know of a half a dozen homes in my community in the last 6 months that have been built. They're already using stuff like hardy board siding, and they're already using closed soffits and that type of stuff. So you're adding some mesh to vents and some other things. The cost is not terribly substantial. Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa.
I just wanted to echo what Chief Dahl was just talking about, that that WUI code under RC 1927 is for new homes. It's not retroactive. It hasn't talked about being retroactive. And then the cost obviously can increase, but under the current building codes and fire codes, like he was just talking about, you're getting a hardy plank and different construction measures with new construction, but unless the legislature made the WUI code retroactive, it would not apply to existing structures.
Thank you. Steve.
I'll just go on record to support what was said. I think for all the reasons you just heard, I feel like it's almost a distractor or confusing issue relative to what we're trying to accomplish, particularly if the focus is on grants and retrofit. So I would totally separate issue. And obviously the WUI code is, as it was referenced, is undergoing some national review right now for hopefully some updates and implementation in the future, but it does feel like it's distracting right now for what we're trying to accomplish.
Thank you. David, do you have a thought before we move to our next poll question?
Yep. We're trying to find a pathway to a recommendation to address subsection 3A relating to type of a recommendation to coordinate or develop state wildfire property mitigation standards. The first poll, there appeared to be some agreement that IBHS should be recognized there. The second poll was no agreement that that the International WUI Code should be mentioned really in the report there. Does the members of the work group want to acknowledge the importance of continuing this work? I mean, the work group's going to end, and should there be a recommendation of how to keep the conversation ongoing? And so, if so, Kelly, I think we have a poll that maybe we could run if the group wants to do that, if the group has that.
Yeah.
Path forward.
Thank you. That is indeed our next question for you. Deanne, would you pull up poll 3, please? And let me read it for anyone listening. Should the recommendation include the importance of continuing this discussion on a standard for wildfire property mitigation standards? If you are a panelist, you should see an option, a poll here with a yes/no option. Kenton, okay if do you have a wording question, or is it okay for me to let the poll finish and then come to you? Okay. Okay, Deanne, would you close the poll and share the results for us, please? We have good consensus on we need to continue the conversation. 30 people said yes, 2 people said no, meaning 32 of the 41 participated in the poll. With that, let me stop sharing that, and Kenton, invite you to share.
Well, having voted on the prevailing side, I just wanted to throw out that, yeah, I think this is critically important to continue some of these discussions more in depth. But I'd like to suggest that, especially since we have legislators participating in the meeting, that the work group should probably be reconstituted to include some other folks that have direct experience, lived experience, and knowledge in some of these areas, and more information about how the International Building Code comes together, how it's adopted, that kind of stuff. I think would help the group understand better what the implications are for making a recommendation around building codes. And I'd like to suggest that be considered if the work group is going to continue, or some other work group is going to replace it in future legislation. I'm talking to you, Representative Reeves.
Thank you. Melissa.
While the state fire marshal's office is not the adopter, obviously under 1927, that's the state building code council. We are users of the international codes that are adopted in the state of Washington. We work directly with the Washington State Association of Fire Marshals, the fire chiefs, and all of the other fire service associations across the state. And so we have an interest, not only that, but we also are involved in the all risk mobilization program where we're responding to these large wildfires with the fire service and our other partner agencies. So we have an interest in working in this space and engaging in these topics and trying to find a way to assist our local communities with getting ahead of the call and protecting their investments in their homes. Not only just in the homes, but the life safety aspects, our property conservation and our environmental issues.
Thank you. Okay, I think our last poll. David, would you give a little context for us?
Yes. So when staff was reviewing the other suggestions in this space, and all of those surveys are on your webpage. You can look at everybody's responses. I encourage you to do so. Melissa's office, the State Fire Marshal office, was brought up more than once as being probably the proper governmental entity to kind of lead the next phase here. As Melissa said, they work with building ordinances, they work with fire protection services, they have community risk reduction plans. And so we want to pose to the work group the next polling question specific to the State Fire Marshal Office and maybe how DNR and OIC can support those efforts. So Deanne, can we go ahead and run the next poll? Thank you.
All right, I'm going to read it for anyone listening. Should the recommendation then be to have the State Fire Marshal Office to lead the next phase of discussions with support from DNR and OIC? Panelists should see a yes/no poll and be able to vote. All right, we'll leave the poll up in just a couple more seconds if you're still thinking. And so I'm going to come to you in just a minute. All right, Deanne, would you close the poll, please, and share the results? We have 26 voting yes, 2 voting no, meaning 28 of the 40 responded to the question. Thank you. And Lance.
Sorry, it took me a second to find my button. I just want to say I did select yes as the answer. However, I want to state that the fire marshal's office, the state fire marshal's office, has many unfunded mandates that they have no ability to carry out, unfortunately. And I would hate to give them another unfunded mandate here and not give them the budget authority to ensure that they can follow through with whatever this panel and our representatives decide to put on their plate again. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Melissa.
I will echo that concern from the standpoint of we bring a lot of strength to the table. However, we would need adequate level of support to get this assignment completed.
Yeah, thank you. Ryan.
Thanks, Kelly. Just with Melissa's comments, did you guys get funded to do this, I assume?
We
Through
were
the
not.
budget?
No, we were not. So we were not named in this legislation, but we have interest in this topic. As you know, we spend millions of dollars out of the disaster response account.
Yeah, I misspoke. I meant to say, Kelly, did the legislature give OIC money for what we've been doing now?
David, I'm going to let you answer that one.
Yes, there was a fiscal note associated with the bill, and with the passing of the bill, the fiscal note was appropriated.
So we'd probably need to get some kind of proviso or something this upcoming session to get money for the state fire marshal to continue this work.
Sounds like it. Yeah,
Thank
I don't
you.
want to comment.
Thank you. Steve?
Sorry, I'll just be proactive in answering that question. Yes, I think it's important. I just want to echo what was said. I do think the fire marshal's office is absolutely the appropriate forum, but and I'm excited. We do have the new policy board advising the fire marshal's office. It has all the stakeholder groups coming back together for the first time in 15 years, but it did not have budget funding with it either. And so I think it will be important as a part of that recommendation to attach a acknowledgement that funding is necessary.
Thank you. I think, my friends, that we have gotten all the information so that the team can go ahead and write up the report. David, Lauren, anything I have not asked that you want to find out before we close out our meeting?
No, I don't think so. I would take the opportunity now, though, to say the staff supporting the work group, Lauren Burns, Deanne Fritchie, and myself, we want to thank you, Kelly, for the great work leading the work group meetings and perspectives on how to facilitate discussions in such a large group that's outside of our skill set. I also want to thank Lauren Torgensen, who has provided irreplaceable amounts of background information on the complexities around wildland urban interface and wildfire risk to us as staff. Finally, I want to acknowledge Robin Whitney from the Department of Natural Resources for our collaboration in assisting Commissioner Updegrove and Commissioner Cooterer, co-chair of the working group. Couldn't have gotten to this point without your assistance. Finally, as I've said many times, I want to thank the work group members. Your engagement and participation in these topics has really been unlike anything I've experienced in the dozens of national and statewide working groups I've been associated with over the past year. So thank you. Thank you so much. And I'll just hand it back to Kelly or anybody else to close.
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you to everyone. Representative Reeves.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. I just want to, similar to David, as the prime sponsor of the bill that brought you all together, just echo my thanks, first and foremost, to the leadership team, one, for your clear collaboration and clear communication, consistent communication as well. This is probably one of the better work group models that I've seen come out of legislative activity. And so and I'm excited to kind of know what the potential recommendations are well before the report actually shows up and in time to actually draft follow-on legislation. So just want to say thank you to you all for leading us through this process. But again, like David, to all of the participants, none of you are getting paid to be here, and yet your passion and your commitment to solving these problems is so incredibly clear. And I'm really excited to hopefully find a path forward on future work that's going to help us continue to put our consumers and our constituents first in this work. And so thank you guys for what you're doing. Thank you for showing up at all of these meetings and surveys and other things. And I look forward to following up with you all, particularly the fire marshal, on what next steps might look like. So thank you.
Thank you. Deanne put the link to our work group webpage where, as you have seen, and on that page already, there's lots and lots of information, and also the OIC email address. If you have any further thoughts or comments that you want to bring in, or questions, you can send those there. David, I think that we are ready to tie a bow and be finished with this work group and say a big thank you. So thank you all. I really have enjoyed getting to hear all these different perspectives. Thank you for being here. And David and team, we await the report in a number of weeks.
Thanks for your work, David and Kelly. Really, really well done. And we all, I think, appreciate it a lot.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Take
everybody.
care.
Take care.